Most gardeners don't have a fertilizer problem, they have a biology problem. They throw nutrients at their soil, chase quick green growth, and then act surprised when the plants stall mid-season, fruits split, or blossom end rot shows up anyway. I mixed coffee grounds with eggshells because I was tired of watching otherwise healthy beds underperform. The soil performance result was shocking, not because it exploded overnight, but because the stability and consistency improved in ways synthetic fertilizer never delivered. Farm logic. If you're serious about growing better food and not just bigger leaves, subscribe to the channel. This is about managing soil systems, not chasing garden hacks. I stopped using kitchen scraps randomly and started treating them like inputs in a controlled system. Coffee grounds on their own can be helpful or harmful depending on how they're used. They're roughly 1.5 to 2% nitrogen and they break down fast. But when gardeners dump thick layers directly around plants, they create a dense, water-repelling mat that suffocates roots. I've seen seedlings stall simply because the soil surface turned anaerobic under a wet crust of grounds. Eggshells actually have the opposite problem. People just toss in these half-crushed shells and, well, they expect instant calcium correction. But whole pieces can actually sit in the soil for years. I've dug up intact shells even 3 seasons later. Calcium carbonate just doesn't become plant-available quickly unless it's finely processed and really worked into active microbial soil. So I decided to change the approach completely. I started by drying eggshells thoroughly, then grinding them into a fine powder, not just crushed, powdered. That dramatically increases the surface area and really speeds up microbial interaction. After that, I blended the powder with used coffee grounds at a ratio of about 4 parts coffee grounds to 1 part eggshell powder by volume. And that mix, well, it went into the compost first, not straight into the beds. That distinction matters. I built side-by-side compost piles to test this. Each pile was roughly 3 feet wide and 3 feet tall. Both had shredded dry leaves as the primary carbon source. One pile received regular kitchen scraps. The other received the coffee eggshell blend layered consistently between carbon layers. For every 3 inches of dry leaves, I added about ½ inch of the coffee eggshell mix, then lightly moistened to a wrung-out sponge consistency. Within 5 days, the coffee eggshell pile ran 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit hotter in the core. That's not guesswork. I monitor compost temperatures using the RioTemp 36-inch Fahrenheit Backyard Pro Compost Thermometer with digital composting guide. The long probe lets me hit the center accurately, and if you're building serious compost, you need real temperature data. The link is in the description if you want to see what I use. Without a thermometer, you're just turning piles blindly. The hotter pile stabilized around 140 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit for nearly a week before tapering off. That steady heat told me microbial activity was strong, but not extreme. I turned it when it dropped below 115 degrees and repeated the process. In about 6 weeks, that pile was darker, more crumbly, and noticeably richer than the control. Then I tested it where it really matters, in the beds. In a 4x8 raised bed growing indeterminate tomatoes and peppers, I incorporated about 2 inches of the finished compost into the top 4 inches of soil before transplanting. That comes out to roughly 8 to 10 cubic feet of compost across the entire bed. No synthetic fertilizer at planting, just compost and consistent drip irrigation. In a separate bed, with the same varieties and the same watering schedule, I used a standard balanced granular fertilizer, applied at the label rates every 3 weeks. Early growth was similar. By week 5, differences showed up. The compost amended bed had thicker stems and darker, more uniform leaf color. The fertilizer bed had slightly faster vertical growth, but honestly, the tissue felt softer. By mid-season, blossom end rot showed up in the fertilizer bed first, despite adequate watering. The compost bed had minimal issues. That's when the real result became obvious. It wasn't explosive growth, it was resilience. So the eggshell component wasn't acting as some miracle calcium shot. Instead, it was actually buffering pH and, slowly releasing calcium, while the coffee-driven microbial bloom improved nutrient cycling. Now, calcium uptake isn't just about how much is in the soil. It's really about consistent moisture and, of course, healthy root systems. The compost blend improved soil structure enough that water distribution was more even. That kind of consistency reduced stress and, improved calcium transport. In containers, the results were even more pronounced. For 10-gallon grow bags filled with a peat-based potting mix, I blended in 2 cups of finished coffee eggshell compost per container before planting tomatoes. I also added 1 tablespoon of additional eggshell powder directly into the mix for long-term buffering. Throughout the season, I top-dressed with half a cup of compost every 4 weeks and lightly scratched it into the surface. I avoided raw coffee grounds in containers entirely. That's a mistake in confined soil volumes. Composting them first is really critical. Containers just don't forgive imbalances. The plants in compost-amended containers held moisture better between waterings. I measured runoff volume after irrigation and found less rapid drainage compared to plain potting mix with synthetic feeding. Root balls at season's end were dense but not root-bound, with strong lateral branching. Now let's address hydroponics, because I tested that too. You cannot add coffee grounds or eggshell powder to a hydroponic reservoir. That will clog lines and destabilize pH immediately. But I experimented in a media-based system using cocoa coir and perlite with drip-fed nutrients. I brewed an aerated compost extract using 1 cup of finished compost per 5 gallons of dechlorinated water, aerated for 24 hours. After straining thoroughly through fine mesh, I applied it as a root zone drench around the media, not into the nutrient tank. The result wasn't dramatic growth spikes. It was improved root mass density and slightly reduced salt stress over time. In hydro systems, biology must be carefully controlled, but introducing well-filtered compost extract around media beds added microbial diversity without contaminating the reservoir. Okay, so here's where I need to correct some common advice. Coffee grounds are not actually acidic once they've been brewed. Most of the acidity gets extracted during the brewing process. So, the fear that used coffee grounds will drastically acidify your soil is really overstated. However, if you over-apply them, they can temporarily tie up nitrogen as microbes work to decompose them. That's why, honestly, composting first is just critical for serious growers. Eggshells are not some fast fix for blossom end rot. If your watering is inconsistent, no amount of powdered shell is going to save you. Calcium actually moves with water, so you've got to fix your irrigation first, then improve your soil structure. Only after that should you worry about calcium supplementation. Now, the shocking part of this experiment wasn't yield doubling or any dramatic size differences. The total harvest weight between the beds was within about 10% of each other. The real difference was in quality and consistency. There were fewer cracked tomatoes, firmer peppers, less mid-season stress, and honestly, just better soil texture at the end of the season. When I dug into the compost-amended beds after harvest, the soil crumbled easily in my hand. Earthworm activity was visibly higher. The fertilizer-fed bed was productive, but the soil felt tighter and more compacted despite identical watering. That's long-term thinking. If you're building new beds from scratch, I recommend blending equal parts native soil and mature compost made with the coffee eggshell mix. For every square yard, incorporate 1 to 2 additional cups of finely powdered eggshell during bed prep. Water deeply, let it settle for 2 weeks, and transplant into stabilized soil. So just remember to monitor your compost temperatures, keep your carbon to nitrogen ratio balanced around 30:1, and maintain moisture at that wrung-out sponge level. Turn your pile when core temperatures drop below 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Honestly, if you're not measuring temperature, you're not really managing compost, you're just hoping for the best. The thing is, the combination of nitrogen-rich coffee grounds and calcium buffering eggshell powder works because it feeds microbes first. Plants benefit as a result of biological balance, not from chemical force feeding. That's the lesson here. If you found value in this, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We focus on methods that improve soil year after year, not quick fixes that just burn out your beds. And hey, share this with another gardener who's still tossing raw scraps into the soil and, wondering why results are inconsistent. Better food really starts with better systems, and better systems start with understanding what's actually happening in your soil.